So today I'm at Oak Hill Cemetery in Battle Creek, Michigan, and we're going to look into the history of some of the heroes of World War II that are buried here. So come along and join me. Attilio Mario Tony Grestini enlisted September 19, 1940 and became a sergeant, Company B, 105th Infantry, U.S. Army. He was manning a rifle position during a Japanese attack on the Pacific island of Saipan when he lost his left arm in an artillery shell. He was later a patient at Percy Jones Hospital and received a Bronze Campaign Star. He lived in Battle Creek for 30 years. After his discharge from the Army, he worked in Battle Creek for Reliable Motors and later for the Adams and Bailey firm. He died in 1975 at the age of 54 after he had been ill for a few years. Alex Willis Wilkins, during World War II, served as a private first class in the U.S. Army. He fought in Normandy and in northern France. He enlisted in 1943 and served until his discharge in 1946. He was awarded 2 Bronze Service Stars and a Good Conduct Medal. Upon returning from the war, he worked for the Battle Creek Housing Commission. He also worked as a housekeeper for the Battle Creek Federal Center. He also worked for the Battle Creek Veteran Medical Center. He died in 2003 at the age of 79. Donald Reiser was born in Battle Creek and was a 1943 graduate of Lakeview High School. In high school, he was a magician and made his professional debut at the age of 16. In 1944, he was inducted into the Army, and less than 2 months after arriving overseas, he distinguished himself by coming back from patrol with a Nazi colonel as his prisoner. He had fought in campaigns of the Ardennes, Rhineland, and in Central Europe, and including the Battle of the Bulge. He was awarded the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, and a Presidential Unit Citation. After his military discharge, he began studying at the University of Michigan, graduating in 1950 with a degree in journalism. As a senior at UM, Reiser won the Hopewood Poetry Award for a poem titled The Toy Soldier. In 1951, Exposition Press of New York published a series of 35 of Reiser's poems, calling the book The Toy Soldier. During this time, Reiser was employed by the Kellogg Company, where he assisted with the writing and publication of the company magazine. He moved to Chicago in 1955 and worked for the National Research Bureau. He died in 1989 in Park Ridge, Illinois. Alvin Kearns and his twin sister were born on March 27, 1925. They came to Battle Creek with their parents while they were both young. Elvin attended school here in Battle Creek and was married a month before his induction in July 1943. He participated in the D-Day invasion of France and was wounded within a month, was sent to recover in England, and eventually rejoined his outfit on August 3rd. He was fatally wounded November 20th, 1944 in Germany. Private Kearns was buried in Henry Chapelle Cemetery in Belgium after his death on German soil. He remained there for almost 3 years until he was eventually transported back home to Battle Creek and interred here at Oak Hill Cemetery in 1947. Emeline Jane McCowen enlisted in the Women's Army Corps during World War II and decided not to attend officers' training school so that she could serve overseas. She served in New Guinea and in the Philippines as a cryptographer and was awarded the Bronze Star for merit. A native of Kansas City, Missouri, she graduated from Battle Creek Central High School and later attended Western Michigan University and the National College of Education at Northwestern University. She received a master's degree from Columbia University. She taught school in Battle Creek, also in Utica, New York, Denver, Colorado, Lake Forest, Illinois, and Kalamazoo, and until her retirement was the assistant professor of education at Western Michigan University. She died in 1976 at the age of 69. Frank Cooley enlisted November 30th, 1942, and became a staff sergeant with Company G, 409th Infantry, U.S. Army. He was in the Battle of the Bulge, which was fought primarily in winter conditions, and he received numerous wounds and shrapnel in his arms and elsewhere, including several fragments of shrapnel that were in close proximity to his spinal cord that were not removed for fear of the danger of paralysis. He earned 2 overseas service medals, the Bronze Battle Star and the Purple Heart. When he returned home after the war to the Battle Creek area, he spent many years employed at the Custer Job Corps Center, but for roughly 20 years he was in poor health, largely due to the wounds that he suffered at the Battle of the Bulge. He died in 1967 at the age of 49. George Benton Dolliver Jr. was active in Boy Scouts, and at the age of 12 was the youngest Eagle Scout in America, as he qualified on his birthday that made the award legal, having already passed all the required tests. When World War II broke out, he became a second lieutenant in the 105th. He was in the 27th Infantry Division, which joined with the Marine 2nd and 4th Divisions in attacking the Japanese on the island of Saipan. I came across an article when researching Mr. Dolliver about a private who knew Lieutenant Dolliver and had served under him. They first met at Pearl Harbor and were together when they landed on Saipan. He described Lieutenant Dolliver as being very popular among his men. They referred to him as Big Stretch. And when they landed on the island of Saipan, he described the landing as having landed in waters filled with alligators. They didn't really run into a lot of enemy fire until they got further up into the island. The initial assault on the Battle of Saipan began on June 15th. Lieutenant Dolliver was killed on July 12, 1944, while fighting with the Army infantry troops on Saipan. He was only 36 years old. Robert Digby was inducted March 23, 1942, and first trained as an airplane mechanic at the Air Force's Technical Training School at Chanute Field, Illinois, from which he was graduated in September 1942. He was later accepted for pilot's training, receiving primary instruction at Santa Ana, California, and advanced training at Luke Field, Arizona. He received his Silver Wings and a commission as a second lieutenant June 21, 1943. He was assigned to be a co-pilot to another Michigan native, Lieutenant Dean M. Radke, of a flying fortress. On a mission over Germany on December 30th, 1943, the flying fortress, flying in formation, engaged in a battle with 10 Nazi fighters and received a direct hit in the cockpit area by flak from anti-aircraft guns. And the result was near catastrophic. Inside the flying fortress after its battle was a mess of blood splatter and broken controls. One engine had been shot out of the plane and the wings were shredded to ribbons. Lieutenant Digby was killed in the co-pilot seat, and the pilot, Lieutenant Dean Radke, was severely injured but still managed to fly the plane. The fight with the German interceptors took place before the target was reached, but Radke, brushing the blood from the shattered instrument panel, refused to turn back without dropping his bombs, which he also managed to hold onto the ship in tight formation during the greater part of the trip. During the entire homeward trip, another lieutenant, who was the bombardier, stood between the seats of the pilot and co-pilot and held an oxygen mask to Radke's face to keep him from passing out, as Radke's own oxygen mask had been torn off and smashed by the force of the explosion. The top turret gunner descended from the top turret on the return trip and helped remove Lieutenant Digby's body into the radio room and towards the end of the grim journey, which was over 300 miles returning to the England Air Base. The top turret gunner sat in the co-pilot seat and helped the pilot land the flying fortress. Just 3 months later, while flying a mission over Berlin in March of 1944, Dean Radke's plane had both engines hit and the crew and himself bailed out. He was missing in action, and the rest of his crew served the remainder of the war in a prisoner of war camp. Lieutenant Robert J. Digby was only 23 years old. Otis Buchanan enlisted in the Army in 1936. He was a veteran of World War II and the Army of Occupation, serving in 3 major campaigns. He received the European, African, and Mediterranean Campaign Medals, 3 Bronze Stars, and the American Defense Service Medal, the Special Italian Merit of War, and the World War II Victory Medal. After completing his military service in Germany and Italy, he returned to Battle Creek, where he continued to serve with the Army Reserve. Despite his busy work schedule, he remained active in the community with his church, as well as serving on the board of the Battle Creek chapter of the NAACP. He retired as a U.S. Army colonel. His son went on to become a well-known radio news anchor and reporter and television host in Chicago. Otis Buchanan passed away in 1989. Lieutenant Colonel John Lyle Cronkhite Sr. of the United States Air Force was born on November 20th, 1919 in Battle Creek, Michigan, and he moved to St. Petersburg, Florida, where he grew up. He joined the Army Air Corps in July of 1941, and he served for 26 years until he retired on August 7th, 1967. He was a pilot and flew 29 different types of aircraft, including the B-17 Flying Fortress. He was an instructor pilot, an instrument check pilot, logistics officer, and Air Force pilot in England, North Africa, Panama, Korea, Japan, France, and Trinidad. Ernie Pyle's famous book, Here Is Your War, devotes a chapter to Colonel Cronkhite and his crew in North Africa in World War II. The chapter was titled In the Air, and it was one of President Dwight D. Eisenhower's favorite war stories. The story was the inspiration for the song Coming In on a Wing and a Prayer, according to its composer. The stories in the same book were the inspiration for the movie G.I. Joe, starring Burgess Meredith. In his writings, John Cronkhite wrote, Ernie Pyle flew with me on a bombing raid in North Africa. Lieutenant Colonel Cronkhite received many decorations. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross with 1 oak leaf cluster, the Air Medal with 5 oak leaf clusters, the Air Medal with 1 silver oak leaf cluster and 1 bronze oak leaf cluster, the Joint Service Commendation Medal, the Air Force Commendation, the American Defense Service Medal, the American Campaign Medal, the European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign with 4 service stars, and the World War II Victory Medal, along with many other medals, including the Korean Service Medal. He served in World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. His official burial site is at the Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery in Texas. However, his family is buried here at the Battle Creek Oak Hill Cemetery. They wanted to include a headstone marker for him here alongside his family. He died at the age of 92. George Loomis Turner was born February 14, 1915 in Battle Creek. He was a 1934 graduate of Battle Creek Central High School and received his engineering degree from Michigan Technological University in 1939. After college, he worked with the sales of Clark Equipment Company in Chicago until entering the U.S. Army. He served in North Africa and Italy and received a Silver Star for gallantry in action during the Tunisian campaign. Mr. Turner was assigned as an experimental engineer on the staff of the Manhattan Project at the Santa Fe, New Mexico laboratories, where he aided in the perfection and production of the atomic bomb. He was released from military service with the rank of major. He passed away in 1993. Captain William I. Swanston entered the U.S. Coast Guard in July of 1930, and he served as an aviator from 1930 to 1959 in World War II and Korea. He served aboard the cutter Itasca, surveyed the Johnston Island for Amelia Earhart's transatlantic flight, and commanded air stations on the east and west coast. During World War II, he flew anti-submarine patrols in the North Atlantic. He was awarded the Air Medal, the American Defense Service Medal, the American Area Campaign Medal, the European, African, Middle Eastern Area Campaign Medal, and the World War II Victory Medal, along with the National Defense Service Medal. He was discharged from the military service in June of 1959, and he passed away in 1996. This final story that I'm going to share is of Private First Class Harry A. Lacey. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1943, and he was the first Battle Creek soldier from the June 6 Normandy invasion to arrive as a patient of Percy Jones General Hospital. He was wounded in both arms and in the spine on June 28, 1944, while serving with the 331st Regimental Combat Team near Cherbourg, France. His wounds necessitated a number of operations, and after spending 2 years in Percy Jones, he later went to Hines, Illinois Veterans Administration Hospital. He had not been employed since the war. At the time of his death in 1956, he had been staying with his brother-in-law, and he mentioned one evening that he was going to go hop a freight and go to Saginaw. He was hit by a train between South Avenue and Main Street early on a Sunday morning and died 6 hours later from his injuries. Of the 16 million Americans who served during World War II, 405,399 Americans died. This number includes the 72,000 Americans that still remain unaccounted for. There are only 324 World War II veterans still alive today as of March 31st, 2021. With an average of 300 World War II veterans dying each day, it serves as a sense of urgency for me to ask you to reach out to surviving World War II veterans in your community and ask them to tell you their stories and share their experiences so that we can all learn from them. Earlier this year in January, my father, a World War II veteran, passed away. Although his experiences serving in the U.S. Navy in the shore patrol on the island of Guam in the Pacific was perhaps not as colorful or adventurous as many of the other stories that I featured in today's video, all of the 16 million Americans who served played a role in the overall outcome of this great world event. And not a day goes by that I don't regret not having taken my time as a filmmaker to record some of my father telling his stories of World War II. So I encourage everybody out there to reach out to the last surviving members of the Great Generation, veterans or not, and ask them to tell you their stories from that period of time in history. And take time to record it so that future generations can learn from those experiences. Well, that's going to do it for today's tour through World War II history at Oak Hill Cemetery in Battle Creek, Michigan. If you'd like today's video, please take a minute to hit the like button right there, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment and tell me what you thought. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time as we take another journey into history.